Okay, good. Finally, we have some progress. Oh, there's been a bit of a conundrum. Is that the right word? To get this set up in the process. Not only with like the audio and stuff like that, but just getting the account and everything to work. I'm using Streamlabs right now. So anyway, I'm going to get back to doing this kind of stuff. Hopefully, probably regular, semi-regular basis. It all depends on the schedule and everything, and work is kind of in the busier picking up sort of season right now. But anyway, I have some episodes that I had edited probably like maybe a couple of years ago. But the problem with pre-recording stuff for me anyway is that I never really get around to the editing part. So I'll set everything up, I'll record, I'll light the scene, whatever I do, set up the audio, and that will all go fairly well, but it's getting around to actually combing through it all and editing it all, cutting out stuff. Now Adobe has come a decent way with the automated features, or maybe they might have, no, I think that they didn't have some of these features when I was doing more of this before, but now you could do like a transcript based editing and cut out the dead space, which probably would have saved me a lot of time back then. But regardless, I think that all that to say, I'll digress or get back to the point here, is that just doing like these short little live stream spurts about given topics is probably the most lightweight and easiest thing to do and easiest way to do it going forward. So that's probably what I'm going to do now. Just kind of have like the makeshift setup here and just kind of talk about stuff. I probably just made my mic clip there, not sure. It's a bit ragtag right now, but we're going to do this. I still have like a bunch of topics to get through. Like again, like I think I've already recorded a good portion of these, but I never got around to editing everything. I still have some episodes that I edited before that have not been all published yet, because I kind of want to watch through them before I publish them, just so I kind of feel good or confident to publish it, rather than be like, oh, well, that didn't sound too good, I wish I wouldn't have published that, Anyway, moving on. So I think doing this kind of stuff is probably at least one of the directions I'm called in right now, in terms of, if you just sum it up, I said this the other day, something like this: if everybody looks to somebody else to do something, then nobody will do anything. Something like that, right? If we're all kind of waiting for somebody else to do something, then you would logically think then probably nothing is going to happen. Now, ultimately, God is sovereign, and if God wants something to happen, He'll make it happen. But in terms of like, are His followers being obedient to what He wants them to do, and what is the will of the Father? I've been saying that lately, and so it could very well be varied for each person in terms of specific day-to-day things, obviously. But yeah, I'm no expert theologian or anything, but hopefully I will be doing something right in getting back to doing this. So now I will actually get to the point after almost 4 minutes of that, but it has been a minute since I've uploaded anything in this style, so I guess it's maybe warranted. So the purpose of this episode, to get to the actual point, or maybe it's fair to say there's multiple points, but the topic that I named this episode, or at least at the time of going live, was around gas guzzling vehicles. And will it become as taboo as this ... The this in this context is firearms. So when I wrote this note, it was probably around the idea that, like, if you look at gun culture, it all depends on who you talk to, and you could almost kind of tell, you could probably tell a decent amount about a person based on their perspective towards firearms and gun culture. Not everybody has to be the same, obviously, but it's just like, you could tell kind of how pro-freedom or pro-security an individual is by how they view gun ownership. COVID and all those different times, and the riots and everything that happened in 2020, and I mean, you could just talk about riots at any time in history, and how people responded and acted and reacted to those things. I think gun ownership hit record highs during COVID, during like the George Floyd riots and everything else. The protests that were referred to as mostly peaceful, but yet, as far as I understand, I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, resulted in, was it roughly $2 billion in property damage across the US? So that is very expensive, mostly peaceful damage. But I digress. All that to be said about gun ownership and it being kind of a taboo topic, because different people are kind of like, oh, you know, some people are kind of like afraid of guns and think that guns are the problem, and then some people are like, hey man, it's the people, not the guns. And I've heard people talk about, like, when it comes to certain kinds of medications and the effects that that can have on the mind, and maybe that might be more of the reason for certain issues happening than just gun ownership. Because guns have been available for a long time, and certain incidences of violence, I won't get too specific on what the incidences are, but read between the lines and be reasonable with me here for a second. Some of those kinds of incidents, as far as I understand, potentially only started happening in like the 90s. So if gun ownership has been so widespread for so long, why did it kind of happen in this way more or less around like late 90s? But I don't know enough about that topic to really go deep on it, but there's probably people that do know much more than myself about what goes into these kinds of situations and would be able to describe it much better. But that's just a little food for thought. Good to ask questions, right? So all that to be said about the framing of what makes, that's even just maybe some of the framing of what makes gun ownership taboo. Is it possible that with all of the modern day climate alarmism, etc., that one day gas guzzling, to use that term, vehicles, right? So like here in my note, I just have, will owning a gas guzzling truck one day be considered as taboo as owning firearms? Because like if you have a vehicle that is very hard on gas or diesel, that is something that's probably going to be more scoffed at, especially by people that are super pro-green agenda, than owning like a Toyota Corolla, right? So if you have that as the extreme example, it's a bit more easier to make the argument of like, you know, an F-350 with smokestacks, rolling coal. It's easier to make an argument for that being taboo than for your little, you know, Toyota. But regardless, you could even maybe imagine a scenario where it all becomes taboo. Because, like, I think at the time that I wrote this note, I think that the EV craze might have been a bit more strong. I think it's interesting, it's maybe a good thing coming back to these notes and talking about them like a couple more years removed. Because a lot of these notes are probably written between the time of 2020 and maybe 2022-ish or 2021, that period. So like we've kind of gotten to see a lot of things like rise and fall or come and go, or, you know, ebbs and flows, whatever the words are, to describe how it was like kind of like bam in your face and then things kind of fizzled out, right? So with the EV stuff, the electric vehicle market, it seems like maybe people are kind of coming to the vibe. I'm not 100% sure if this is accurate, but the vibe feels like people are coming to terms with the impracticality of it. The fact that, or not necessarily the fact, but maybe that it's just like, if you don't have proper infrastructure, like I'm in northern Canada and we got like some charging stations, like we just recently got like 3 in my town. You know what I mean? Like otherwise you would have had to just charge at your house, otherwise you're pooched, right? Like, or whatever. Like it's not very practical and maybe feasible is a good word as well when you don't have the infrastructure for it. And also like the charge times, right? The charge times, from what I hear, are not good. I'm just gonna look this up real quick so I can use my Streamlabs stuff here to go to the fancy second screen. Okay, so let's, just for the sake of experimentation, Okay, so we'll just go with the AI response for the sake of time. Well, partly laziness maybe, but well, I mean, like the AI could give a pretty good answer. Okay, so home charging level 2. Okay, so there might be, so there's mobile connector. What? Full charge of 5 to 7 days. Wow. 3 to 6 miles of range power. So that's the mobile connector. So I'm guessing that's like a portable battery, I assume. But this is the, so home charging 8 to 10 hours for a full charge. Okay, superchargers 20 to 80% charge. Okay. So this is weird. I didn't know about this. So what's up with that extra? Is it implying that an extra 20% takes 45 minutes compared to the 20 to 80% charge taking 15 minutes? First of all, I didn't know it was that fast. So maybe it's come a long way, or maybe it's always been like that. But so there's a few different factors, right, when it comes to what goes into charging a Tesla. Let me just pull that down here. Okay. So, based on this, so I don't know. Is this with the home chargers? So with a standard wall connector at home, it can take 4 to 10 hours, while Tesla superchargers can charge a vehicle to around 80% in 34 minutes. So even the AIs don't agree. So regardless, let's do the average here for the sake of the argument. Let's say it takes between 15 minutes and 40 minutes to get somewhere between 20 and 80% of the charge. This is like a wide range of estimation here. Regardless, the point is still proven that it takes longer than filling with gas or diesel. Just talking practicality. If you already have to go a good distance every day, whether it's to get to work or do your regular stuff, do you want to sit at the station for 15 minutes? And also, how many chargers are at the station? Do you have to wait in line for 3 people in front of you, right? So 15 times 3, 45 minutes. Do you want to wait 45 minutes to then charge your car to roughly around 80%? So you're going to have to take an hour to do it if there's 3 people in front of you. Like this is like not necessarily always the scenario, but we're talking like this theoreticals. So with that said, compared to filling with gas taking, let's say 5 minutes or less, again, depending on how much you want to put in, and how, like with my car, or I'll put it this way, like, cause, anyway, with the Honda that I drive, it has an issue with the gas tank where you have to only let in a little bit of gas at a time, or else it'll like click off or whatever, but that's not most vehicles. So even with my car that takes longer to fill, it still doesn't take this long as if I had an electric vehicle. And I'm not sure how they hold up in the cold. I won't bother looking that up because this is already getting like just too much time on maybe the specifics of EVs. But like, if we're talking practicality, I'll just leave the question with you guys. If you live in a colder place, how do these hold up in the winter? I know a guy who used to live in town, had a Tesla. He said that they had a internal like heating system or whatever, that the battery would power the heating system to keep the battery at like a good temperature or whatever. So then he didn't seem to have any issues driving his Tesla in our little town up in Ontario during winter. So it's because some people might be concerned that it wouldn't start in the cold, just because I think that people look at how much difficulty you can have with a gas vehicle starting in the cold without a block heater. So they might think, oh, well, do the EVs have the same issue? Now, maybe not all EVs have this battery warmer. I don't know. But regardless, all of these different factors combine with the fact that I hear that Toyota is working on hydrogen stuff. And I've heard that they're not even making any EVs. I think that they're making like hybrids. Haven't they made? I assume that Toyota's made hybrids for a while. I could be wrong about that. But with Toyota doing the hydrogen stuff, if they end up going forward with that and actually make it work, and the thing to make it work is that if hydrogen works just as reliably and as well, and if it's safe, like if you're not going to have like explosions or whatever, if it's like legit safe, practical stuff like that, and the fill times, like the refueling times, are like roughly the same as gas, I don't know that EV. I'm not going to say EV doesn't survive, but I don't know that they're going to have the same level of market share and hype. As far as I've heard, hydrogen cars would only produce water vapor as a byproduct. I could be wrong with that too. If they burn clean, or at least cleaner than gas, you can make the argument there for like the more eco-friendly. Especially if they only produce water vapor, then like, dude, like the argument's pretty solid if that's the case. And then if you can have faster fueling times, and if they don't have any issues like with like starting in variable weather, if like the thing's not going to explode easily or whatever, like maybe word that better in the advertisement. But if it's safe, I think that like don't mislead people. Just like if it's safe, tell them it's safe. Work on making it safe, and then if it's safe, then I don't know that EVs will keep their edge. Now, how to get back to the original point, will it become taboo to own a gas vehicle? And you could argue this even if hydrogen ends up being the way of the future and not electric vehicles. There's an interesting argument to be made for getting away from fossil fuels in general, just because of it being a at least semi-limited supply. I say semi-limited because maybe there's ways that you could make more fossil fuels, but as I'm not an expert on if that would be a doable thing, like could you actually find a way to renew that resource? Like as far as what I know, like I'm not even going to get into the history or the science / history of how fossil fuels are formed, but regardless, all that debate aside, if you can't renew that as a resource, if that's even like a phraseology that would be acceptable to use with this, it like the argument for getting away from fossil fuels because there's a limited amount of it, eventually you're going to run out. I think that's what Elon was basically talking about on Joe Rogan like a while ago, like not recently, but like I think years ago, that there's a finite amount, as far as we would understand, or as far as we would assume. So getting away from that at some point would be a wise idea, because what happens if you just run out, right? If the oil sands just dry up and you have nothing else that's stable enough or set up enough in your infrastructure, then you just kind of like collapse. So it's good to, I guess, try to move forward to something else that it works. And then beyond that, which one is the one that takes lead? Is it hydrogen? Is it electric? You need something, like, first of all, as far as I understand, you need to actually make electric vehicles that are charged off electricity that is completely renewable, like from not, fossil fuel related production, right? Because isn't it just like coal plants or whatever that help to fuel a good portion of the electric vehicles? Like, let's see this. Okay, so again, we'll just go with like what the AI response is. RUV storage. Okay. Here's a summary. So on the location, reasonable. In some areas such as West Virginia, 94% coal-powered grid, and Kentucky, 75% coal-powered grid. EVs are indeed charged by coal plants. So, okay, so might be location dependent and everything else. Regardless, generally speaking, it's probably fair enough to say that it's like, if your grid is powered by coal or other kinds of fossil fuel, whatever, not green energy, then it's kind of all just like is the term smoke and mirrors proper here? Like, where it's like, how green is your energy if you're just moving the fossil fuels from here to here, but you're still like, you're driving electric here, but it's still being powered by fossil fuels here. Like, who are we fooling, you know? So like, if you actually had the argument of like, this is completely nuclear powered grid charging the EVs, or, you know, solar, wind, whatever, and like, you could debate how efficient those forms of energy are. We gotta get on the 0 point energy thing. There we go. Then that would be probably the future, and you could get into a pretty good rabbit hole on like, if that's something that's already been figured out or not. Yeah, and I think I'm just rambling now, but like, I've probably been rambling for a while, but I'll leave that there. At some point, depending on how things shift, right, and how culture goes with it, I think that at least in terms of the EV hype, that might be kind of meeting a bit more of a cold reality, kind of punny based on what we were saying earlier. It might be kind of, the hype might be dying down a bit, and people might be like, you know what, gas is still pretty legit. And so until there's the proper infrastructure to make a complete jump to that, or hydrogen takes over, we'll see what happens. That will be interesting. If Toyota figures that out and everybody else follows suit with that, then EVs might be having a sad time. But until that actually happens or not, we'll just like see where that goes. Will it become as taboo as gun culture, or as gun ownership? That would probably take a severe amount of propaganda, and like, I don't actually know that you could pull it off, because you're talking about trying to make it seem like gas vehicles are like comparable with like portraying gun ownership as akin to increasing risks of violence. Like, and it's like, it's not even like this, like, it's not even the same category. Like, people might try to make that argument because this green movement probably does all kinds of crazy stuff, and like, I could probably get into other examples, but I don't have like all like the stuff, all the facts in front of me. But you could probably just look up stuff along the topics of like I heard something about like, you know, people being encouraged to not have children in order to like save the planet or prevent climate change or whatever that is. If you just look up those headlines or something like that, you'll probably find some article that's saying something wild like that. It's like there might be people that make the argument that gas vehicles are as bad as guns, but it's like apples and oranges kind of in terms of the actual meat and potatoes of the subject. Beyond that, it's probably way easier to be more hyperbolic with gun ownership than like gas-powered vehicles or gas-powered anything. Will people still try to make some level of argument on that scale? Maybe. It probably won't be taken as seriously though, and also you have to look at like, not everybody like owns firearms or sees them as necessary, but probably most people that are earning a wage and are like a functional adult in the West own a vehicle, at least one, probably, or, you know, maybe have like oil furnace, or somehow people hopefully see that fossil fuels are very helpful and useful. And so just on the level of mass adoption of how it's become part of our everyday lives, you'd have to swing pretty hard to try to spin that as, you know, to make it that taboo of a subject. They might try. I think it would probably be more likely to happen if you had the mass adoption of another form of energy. So if, say, they figured out 0 point energy, and it's like, dude, all the problems are solved with this, and you still have people being like, but gas, you know, gas is better or whatever, which in that scenario it would be, I think, definitionally not better, because I think the whole idea of 0 point energy is it's infinite, whereas like gas, obviously not, or not even like the same level in terms of immediate access and usability and, you know, longevity. But even then, like, just saying that they'd be able to swing it that hard, I don't know if that would, maybe somebody will try, but it would be a hard sell to make it seem that bad to use gas. I need to end this here. So this is basically where it's at. gas is still pretty legit. So like, let's be reasonable and maybe think real hard before getting an EV, because it may not be quite the dream that you think it is. Maybe if you have like a second vehicle that's an EV, that might be more reasonable. And even like I heard about like the self-driving feature on the Teslas. That'd be pretty cool. I think you still technically have to. I don't know if you have to have your hands on the wheel, or if you just kind of like a few fingers on the wheel, or if you take your hands off the wheel. I don't know how it works. I don't know on a Tesla, but if it's like that, that sounds pretty cool. So, and like I wouldn't mind probably having like a Cybertruck or something like that. Side tangent, on top of every other side tangent that's happened here. Tesla should make home appliances. Why isn't there a Tesla vacuum? I feel like that makes a lot of sense. Like just Elon, like Tesla home appliances. You already got like the fridge battery thing, like the fridge size battery. Just do like microwaves, toasters, actual fridges, not just battery size fridges, but real fridges. The best. Anyway, Tesla, get on that. So please. Anyway, I'm gonna end that there. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this whole live stream thing will work out half decently, maybe, but whatever. I don't know. I don't even know how to